Hello again. Let me just take a sip. Adam's ale. Adam never had any ale, he just had water. Wow, I've just noticed I need a haircut, but it's a bit too cold at the moment, so we let that go. Let me just say here and now that what I say is purely from my observations, and I'm not criticising anyone or anything. I may make a few suggestions, but that's about it. I love Finland from what I observed, and the culture fascinated me. Still does. Still very interesting. And I follow most Finnish mainstream media in English, I might add. The thing is with the Finnish culture, is it, this is a question, is it being eroded by modernism? I do know from many Finns that I met think exactly that. And Finland certainly isn't what it once was. And neither is anywhere particularly. And that's the danger we all fall into with our politicians. Changing too quickly. And they're bringing new policies, and if those policies don't work, they don't go back to what it was. They just plod on. Chin on chest, waiting for the next disappointment. And that might sum up Finnish Stoicism, also known as sisu. Since the last 2 years, opinions have become extremely polarised. And I wonder why. And vastly different opinions have emerged on both sides. And if you go back in time, the expression of opinions is a sign of a well-regulated democracy. But we must accept that someone else has a different opinion. And just because he or she, Han, I'll explain that shortly, does see things differently, in a different light, they should not be treated as an enemy. Why would that be? I forget who, I think it was a Frenchman, Voltaire perhaps, that said, I may not agree with what you say, but I'll defend it to the death. You're right to say it. Just because someone sees things in a different light, they should not be treated as an enemy. And I know this to be true through my own experiences during this period. I'm ignored and shunned just because I think differently. But anyone who really knows me knows that I've always held opinions that are somewhat different from normal. Does that make me a monster? Really? In the world of social media, yes it does. I'm a monster if I disagree with the herd. I've never understood the notion of hating someone just because of their beliefs. But I do try to understand why we can dislike someone for no apparent reason. Especially when we first meet someone. You look and you think, I don't like you. And why is that? And I've come to the conclusion it's because possibly we recognise something in that person that we don't like in ourselves. Maybe, I don't know. Now, Finnish has no gender pronouns. Isn't that interesting? And might owe its strong stance on gender equality to its language containing no gendered words or pronouns. The most notable is the gender neutral Han, H, A with 2 dots, N. Male can mean man or woman, which is basically a fantastic idea. And I often wonder why the what's that crowd? The LGBTQIA crowd. Why they haven't adopted it as a slogan. probably because it suggests there are only two genders. How radical is that? How radical is that? Countries like Finland and most Nordic countries have a strong feminist tendency, which is great, but let's not forget that we as men do play a role here. And if it wasn't for us, you ladies wouldn't be here. And if it wasn't for you, we wouldn't be here. And that suggests to me that we're equal. Heaven forbid is that such a radical concept. But it goes a bit deeper than that, I think. We as men and you as women need each other to help one another in our different skills that we have. It's called a partnership. But of course, many in today would disagree with that and suggest that all men are stupid and sex maniacs, and probably both. Yeah, sure, we as young men have inordinate amounts of testosterone. And as young men will be, they will flout that. That is, it's nature. As nature intended. And I will confess that at times in my young life, it was like being chained to a marauding maniac. Thankfully, I had Christian principles drummed into me from a child, and I acted accordingly. But to be honest, I wouldn't want to go back to that. Thank you very much. Being a young man once is quite enough. Having said that, in my humble experience, the female of the species has equally powerful hormones as the male. And some females have testosterone in large amounts, trust me on that. But many would deny that, and so the saying goes, the female is far more deadlier than the male, because females have the thing that men desire most, and it's not your cooking skills. I promise you that. And however, women have the power that comes with their guile, and they can certainly use it to their advantage. And because of that, because of the way women can and do use men, a lot of men will just say, okay, you get on with it, and just sit back and wait while watching the Dudesons or Top Gear. And men, when they're crushed, they just give up. They turn to drink or go sulking in their man cave. Here's an interesting one that I read the other day. Oscar Wilde once famously said, everything in this life is about sex, except sex. Sex is all about power. And that power can be used by both men and women. Men by their physical power and women by their guile. How many women would admit to using sex to get what they want? Not many, I guess, but it seems to be a fact of life from where I stand. Is there a lesson here? Yeah, sure there is. When you choose a partner, choose them as a friend first and foremost. Choosing someone because they are good looking or sexually attracted to them usually ends in disaster. And then that person becomes a hate figure for exactly the same reasons I mentioned just now. Nordic countries might be ruled by feminism, but the sad thing is, and this was mentioned by Jordan Peterson, the clinical psychologist, that these countries have the greatest divide between men and women, and it's getting wider and wider. Yeah, you have the youngest female prime minister in the world, a social democrat prime minister who was brought up in what they call a rainbow family. And that means being raised by two females. But in the end, will people tire of this and want to go back to a conservative father figure government? A bit like your President Niinisto or even Mannerheim. I'm not suggesting an old man as a leader. I'm just saying listen to their wisdom, and maybe by having them as advisors. There is a Finnish proverb, and I'll try to pronounce this as best I can. Pari vanhaan paranalla, kun nuoren vallanella, which translates into better under an old beard than under a young rule. In my humble opinion, men have been downgraded to a second-class citizen, and they will be real by doing absolutely nothing and just watch in bemused silence as women make the same mess of everything the men have, and maybe worse, who knows. But humans have moved on. But sadly, we become closer to extinction by our liberal ideology. The battle of the sexes continues and gets even more complicated by the insistence by some that there are many genders. There are not. You either have XX or XY chromosomes. And you'll notice that I put ladies first. And that was something that was instilled in me as a boy. Ladies before gentlemen. And now it's laughed at. And some women actually find it offensive to have a door held open for them. And it was never meant to be a sign that women are weaker than men. It was merely a thing of courtesy. But in itself, it's become unfashionable, and certainly not admired in Finland by anyone. Sadly, I think, because where men once used to hold women in high esteem, they now feel a little contempt for them. Where women have an air of superiority, and it will be seen as arrogance. We seem to be living in a very liberal fantasy world where everything is okay just as long as you don't offend anybody with a different point of view. That's not a good way to carry on, because if we silence free speech, we end up with a seething cauldron of unaired views and deep prejudices. And political correctness is purely fascism disguised as politeness, and will lead us into a society with no tolerance whatsoever. In the immortal words of Paul Simon, actually, around 1966, in his song, he said, "The words of the prophet are written on the subway walls and tenement halls." And now it has come to pass. We have been purposely frightened to death by a bug, and now that narrative is coming to an end. It is inevitable we are now being frightened by another bogeyman, namely the Russian bear. And world leaders all over, they like to keep their subjects in fear, where they are easier to control. Just my opinion, but I don't think I'm alone in that opinion. And just watch out for the future. Take heed from an old man. The writing is on the wall, I can assure you. Thank you for listening to an old man in a chair. Bye-bye. It's up to you. Bye-bye.